Good evening. Oh, no, not yet. Are we ready? Good evening, and welcome to our June 25th meeting, regular meeting of the Milton Board of Selectmen. I'm going to begin with calling the meeting to order. We're going to go right to item 2, review and approval of minutes. And can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes as noted here?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from February 28th, 2018. Actually, I have a point of order
Go ahead.
that I have to ask about. Does this have to be moved by you or Katie? Because,
Probably should be.
yes, I think it should.
So why don't I move that we approve the meeting minutes from February 28th, 2018, April 11th, 2018, April 23rd, 2018, and May 7th and May 8th, 2018, as written.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Well,
Right.
I'm sorry, further question. Can we actually approve them, Tony and Mike and I, since we weren't there, we can? Just making sure. I know you're.
We did it the last
We did it, I was, yeah, when I,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Yeah.
Aye.
Good?
Good.
Item 3, we're going to confirm future meeting dates, and those will be Monday, July 9th, Monday, July 23rd, Monday, August 13th, and Monday, August 27th. I will not be here. I'll be out of the state for July 9th, as I've noted previously, and the Vice Chair, Mr. Zulus, will chair that meeting. And if anyone else has a meeting they're going to miss, as long as, I said, as long as we have a quorum of 3, we're going to keep moving right through this agenda. All good?
Wednesday's meeting?
Oh, Wednesday's meeting, unfortunately, our representative, our architecture representative from Howard Stein Hudson, who we're going to bring in tonight to welcome community comments on the most recent design of the deck park area, as I would call it, had a family emergency and we have to reschedule, so that meeting is going to be canceled. There'll be no meeting this Wednesday, and that meeting will be rescheduled to, they're going to come in on the July 9th meeting.
They can come in on the 9th
Yes.
if
And
you so
just a
choose.
point of comment, I don't follow social media. I make it a point of not reading social media, but over the weekend, a couple people mentioned to me about the park and about the deck. What most people don't understand is that the entire, from when that deck was originally created in 1993, it was a long time ago, 25 years ago, it has a surface, a membrane that canvases the entire top that keeps water from leaking down onto 93 below. And that has been penetrated and has to be totally replaced. Given that, the entire park surface has to be removed, which gave the town, as Howard Stein Hudson described it, a white board to start with. You had to start from scratch. So this is their initial rollout that they're going to come out with, their initial design, based on comments they've received from the community at previous meetings. So that will be moved to July 9th, I'm sorry. Oh, good? Item 4, do we have anyone to speak, to citizen speak? Hold on one second. Okay, I'm going to go to, because I have 2 issues I want to get through quickly.
Yep.
Deb, do you want to, why don't you come first, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Sheffield. Yeah, go right there, yes, please. And if you just state your name and introduce yourself, and welcome to our meeting.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name's Debbie Alcibi. I'm here today as a representative of the Steering Committee for Courageous Conversations Towards Racial Justice. It's a group here in Milton of active citizens, a lot of people from all the different houses of worship, Milton for Peace. But we've been doing these courageous conversations once a month for the last year and a half. And we recently got a grant to bring Debbie Irving, who's the author of the book Waking Up White, to Milton. And we just booked a date with Mary Gormley and the school committee for November 19th. And we're asking that pretty much like nobody in town plan a meeting for that night. We're asking the schools not to have PTO meetings, to have government meetings that
Yeah.
day, because we'd like to have as many people from Milton at her talk. This book is very, very powerful. It's a very easy read as far as intellectual wise. It's just a hard read because of the information that comes out of that. It's basically just talking about how white people walk in the world and how we see things versus our neighbors of color. And it totally woke me up. I can say I had like a 9/11 moment. I can tell you exactly where I was when I was reading this book and how it kind of changed my life. So with this Courageous Conversations, we're doing a summer read program where we're asking, I talked to John King at the police department. He's reading the book. He's going to ask his officers to read the book. I've talked to Mary Gormley. She ordered 30 copies for all the leadership of the Milton Public Schools. She's going to get all of her teachers to read the book. And I'm talking to the selectmen and also for the town hall. Anybody that services people in Milton as a public office should read this book just to get an idea of, again, how we walk in the world. And then again, you can get to see her on November 19th. She's from Cambridge. We got a grant to get her to come, but we're really excited. And again, once a month, we have these courageous conversations. We just had one last week about the history of racism. And this coming July 26th, we're going to be showing the film I Am Not Your Negro by James Baldwin, and that'll be at the Milton Public Library. We rotate these meetings through all the different churches, the public buildings, Church of Holy Spirit. We've been doing a lot of bridging work with our friends in Mattapan and Dorchester, Dorchester People for Peace, the churches there. So it's really catching on, and I'm just telling you, as a white person, it totally changed my life and how I see myself in this world. And I really encourage everyone on the Selectmen Committee, anybody that has to make decisions for our town, should read this book. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I'm selling them.
Also,
I'm supposed to get like 50 copies tomorrow. So I will leave my business card. I also teach kids cooking classes in Milton. I just did a cooking camp today. So if anybody wants a copy, they're $12. It will be the best $12 you ever spend. And as I said, mark your calendars now, November 19th. I'd like to see everybody there, all the selectmen and all the citizens, and let's, fill that auditorium at the Milton High School auditorium, Milton High School auditorium. Oh, sure, yeah. Okay. So thank you.
thank you,
any
Deb.
questions?
No, that's great.
Okay.
And we'll,
Thank you.
I think we'll all be getting copies.
Definitely.
Although she's from Cambridge, I don't know. People from Cambridge, they're a different
She
kind
was
of breed.
she grew up in Winchester, and then she's,
No, that's better than, one I'm referring to grew up in Cambridge. Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Mr. Sheffield.
I'm Bob Sheffield from the Milton Kiwanis, and I want to invite you all to a birthday party.
Just pull that mic up closer, a little bit closer. It's, okay, very good.
That, on the 4th of July, it will be the 242nd birthday for the United States. We will be having festivities that are sponsored by the town of Milton and also by Milton Kiwanis. We will have kids' races from age 2 to 12. We'll be having a patriotic performance with somebody singing the Star Spangled Banner and Pledge of Allegiance. And then we will have the races. We have face painting for the kids. We have the antique fire engine for the kids to climb on. And of course, we have hoodsies that we will be giving to anybody and everybody.
Guile or Kelly, what's the location this year?
The location is at Kelly Field
Kellyfield. The
on
time?
Brook Road at the across from Standish Road.
Okay.
It begins at 9 o'clock. And I have been not hosting it, but I've been emceeing it for the last 35 years and plan to do it again this year. I look back in the archives and I find that back in 1935, we had pretty much the same thing, except the focus was on adults, and they had a antique automobile parade around town, and they had the fireworks at Kelly Field, and they had the ice cream for the children. In 1925, believe it or not, they had somebody from WBZ for entertainment for the kids, and it was Bob Emery. And it was probably the father of Big Brother Bob Emery from a later generation that was on Boston television. But if any of you people are able to be there that day, I would like you to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. And I wouldn't ask you to sing the Star Spangled Banner because it wouldn't be very patriotic.
I hear where you're coming from on that one.
But I want to invite the whole town and make them know what the plans are. And it's a time to celebrate, and I want to make sure that all the Milton youth are invited.
We'll make sure we get that up on the town's website as well.
Excellent.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's my 20th wedding anniversary that day, so I guess I better come. I didn't pick the 4th of July, it picked me. Thank you very much. Dr. Christensen?
Hi, everyone. Cindy Christensen, 59 Collimer Street. I have three things that and one request that I'm bringing to the board tonight about the draft amendment for the FAA reauthorization, item number 8. I don't know that they have the update on any changes that will be made to this proposed amendment, but I have heard from other sources that the current plan is to remove Section 4 on runway use. I think that would be very unfortunate, and here's why. It just needs a little editing to make it reasonable and applicable, or at least not harmful to us and at other airports and other communities. You might know that I joined the Logan CAC during Test 1 and Test 2 runway use programs. I've written my own idea up for a good runway use plan at Logan, and I know the PRAS backwards and forwards. My family and friends joke that I have a diagram of the runways at Logan tattooed on my backside. I'm not going to say either way. I've talked with citizens around other airports and know their concerns. I understand runway configurations and infrastructure, not just here, but at many other major U.S. and foreign airports. I ask that you give me a chance to suggest changes through work with a cooperative and collaborative group of knowledgeable residents. I would expect this to take no more than about an hour. My second topic. Although I recommend modifying, not removing Section 4, if it is removed, I want you to be aware of a few quick fixes that will give this amendment a much better chance of making it through this legislative process. I'm not concerned about a few typos, but for things like this. The allowed distance between planes in the current draft is incorrect, and I believe the FAA will pick up on that. We have to say something like this: these altitudes and level of dispersion will be safe. They'll be safe because in the baseline year they were safe. Otherwise, I'm concerned that the amendment will be dead on arrival. There was an amendment before the House Reauthorization Act where the Air Traffic Control Association and a Democrat, Congressman DeFazio, killed a good, simple House amendment that would have the plane simply fly higher over the ocean. The card they played were safety concerns. I think that we can keep that from happening in this one. There are a few other things, not much, that will improve the chances of the amendment. So again, my request is that you give me a chance to suggest changes through work with a cooperative and collaborative group of knowledgeable residents. This item may take maybe an hour and a half to do. Now I'm saving the best for last. Number 3, just before I left for this meeting, I received feedback from the San Francisco, San Jose small group that I mentioned. Suzanne and I are working with on this quote 5-5 approach that I described in the memo that I shared with you guys over the weekend. This group has some reasonable, small requested changes to the language that I think could be considered so that Maryland, and now I hope California, will speak with us with one voice. They really are pretty small. This group works directly with Senator Feinstein, and she's a powerful addition to our side. Again, I ask that you give me a chance to suggest changes through work with a cooperative and collaborative group of knowledgeable residents, changes that would ensure a combined voice with California. I think you might say that these can all be worked out later, but from my brief multi-year experience doing work with Congressman Lynch, Senators Warren, and now Markey, especially with the Consensus Report Amendment and Act, working it out later doesn't happen with this Congress and is an extra burden on the staff. They are so pressed for time that the best strategy is to give them something close to final. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be closer than this current version, in my opinion. I know the staff I work with appreciate that effort. We have a much better chance if we work it out, not expect that they will. So please consider this request for a little bit more time and a little bit more input. It will be good for the town and it will be good for the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else for citizen speak? Mr. Johanning, I'll take you right after. If you just cite your name and your, no, go ahead, you're right there.
Oh,
Just-
right
just-
here,
yeah.
okay. Sure.
She was already up and halfway there
Oh,
before I,
signing, yeah.
so.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Suzanne Knight, and I live at 25 Spafford Road, and I'm going to talk about the same airplane problem. I'm here as a citizen to present my concern on our current status concerning the airplane problem. This town is fortunate to be home to many good, smart, well-meaning individuals wanting desperately to find a way to reverse the nightmare in which we now find ourselves, while also in a position of becoming, as Cindy just explained, a national leader in the quest to reverse the noise and pollution from our skies. We require a moment to reflect on that major success and look to unite within our town for further success, which will occur. People in the community who are focused on the airplane problem are somewhat divided temporarily, and that extends to a group that I serve, Fair Skies Nation, that Peter Dunn will be able to explain, almost split evenly last night on a vote regarding this particular legislation, but it passed. The vote was 4-3, but he'll explain that. I am here to say that we need to stay positive and focused on uniting. We know Dr. Christensen, Tom Doherty, and Peter Dunn, as well as thousands of Fair Skies Nation members and all of you elected officials are working with us. We do believe that even having a brief additional amount of time to look more closely at Mr. Doherty's proposal, and he can look at our proposals and work together, may be warranted and likely will make the final outcome a better result. I do work closely with Dr. Christensen, and frankly must say what you already know, that her intellect and experience is truly unequaled, in my opinion, on this matter. That's before us and before the nation. And this leadership role she takes on extends beyond Milton to many people around the country, is growing every day, and we really are constructing a coalition of other states with other senators and representatives to do something about this year. So we are now allying to write amendments for the same FAA reauthorization with these other people as she discussed. And I feel that Mr. Doherty is listening to her and others, and that we are listening to him and moving toward collaboration locally. I admire and respect his dedication and experience and the fact that he is donating his expertise to help work out a solution locally. Together, we will fix what has become a huge government mistake.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Johanning.
Hi, my name is Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. I can't say much more than Suzanne just said. The only thing I want to add is that the other night at the Fair Skies Nation meeting, it was agreed that the town needs to speak with one voice. And I think supporting Suzanne, we need to work to make it one voice. I think collaboration is really important. If we disable one person by ignoring their input, we're really hurting the effort overall. So I think the town needs to strive for good collaboration. We're not like Congress. We have to empower each other by listening and incorporating great ideas in the document. So that's all I want to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for citizen speak? Peter Dunn.
Good evening. I'm Peter Dunn. I live at 84 Franklin Street. I'm the chairman of Fair Skies Nation. As was mentioned, we had a board vote last night, and the board voted to support the amendment that's been submitted by Mr. Doherty. Mr. Doherty is a very accomplished lawyer. He's a senior partner at Skadden Arps, which is a global law firm that represents some of the biggest companies in the country and internationally. We're very fortunate to have him and to have his efforts. As he'll describe, he's worked with folks around the country, including members of Congress and the Senate from Massachusetts and from other states as well, and his efforts have been coordinated with people in those other states. For the last 2 years, I joke, I call him our shadow MCAC rep. He's been to way more meetings than I have. He's really delved into the legislation, he's delved into the regulations, and I think he's got a very good read of how things operate, both at the federal, state, local, and at the MCAC level. He spent countless hours researching and drafting this, and this is an opportunity that comes around once every half a decade. The current status of the bill is that it's gone through the House, it's sitting in the Senate now, and it could be called anytime. I'm not sure that we have the luxury of time, and I think Mr. Doherty will remind you of that. So I would ask you to seize this opportunity, to do it quickly, and to keep in mind that we've got someone of extraordinary ability who's helped us to do this and has reached out in a very sophisticated way to people at the highest level. So I urge you to pass his amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for citizen speak? Okay. Oh, please come forward. Good evening.
Evening. Tom Buckley, lifelong resident of Milton, 132 Otis Street, and president of Fair Skies Nation. And I just have to say, you know, we do need to work together. I've emphasized that the last couple of years, and I'm out working with other towns. But, you know, we're here tonight, and whether Tom proposes something, Cindy proposes something, you know, we have a lot of assets here, a lot of great people trying to work together. But, you know, this is a televised meeting.
To half the town tonight, anyway, the half that has power.
And I'm sure the folks at Massport are watching. We can't expose the underbelly of this. So an open floor discussion is going to show any weaknesses, and people out there are going to take advantage of it. So I really think we need to be careful on what we discuss here tonight in an open meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for all your time. Anyone else? Last call, citizen speak. Moving forward. Item 5, we have a public hearing with Attorney Marion McGetrick regarding Abbey Park liquor license agreement. Attorney McGetrick is attending our meeting to discuss a proposed change in liquor license number 00012-RS-0720 held by Abbey Park to reduce the total licensed area of the premises from 6,800 square feet to 5,991 square feet. This reduction will remove 809 square feet of a locked storage room in the basement from the total area. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming.
This is a follow-up to a meeting we had a couple of weeks ago with the selectmen. Abbey Park has a restaurant that's a subsidiary of Welch Restaurant Management. Welch Restaurant Management also has a catering business, Cypress Catering, and they're both located on the same premises. But Abbey Park has a liquor license, and the current liquor license covers all of the premises, including the basement. We did have to research that a bit, but it does. So in order to allow Cypress Catering to use any area on the premises for their own liquor storage for the catering business, ABCC informed me that it would be best, or the right way to do it, would be to go through this public hearing process to alter the premises, the licensed premises for Abbey Park's liquor license. So that's why I'm here for Abbey Park tonight. It's a very minor change, and I don't think most of the time when you alter premises, you make them smaller. You probably usually make them larger. But in this case, we're making the premises a little bit smaller, and the area that we're designating is the area I showed you several weeks ago. It's the 809 square foot closet on the first floor. It was not being used for any particular purpose for the restaurant anyway. It has never been used for liquor service, and will not change the operation of the restaurant at all to do this alteration. This is the step that's required in order for Cypress Catering to be able to complete its catering liquor license application. So that's been paused. And if the board approves this tonight, we can send the approval in the form of a letter and the application to ABCC tomorrow, and they will manage both applications together. So they need this vote in order to proceed with the other license.
So you're correct in your analogy in that you're using the same section of the statute which normally you would see in a license where someone wants to expand to an outside pit. You're reducing. So if you have nothing, we can go two ways. We can, if someone could make the motion, then we could have any discussion or question, a second, and go from there. Is that okay with everyone? So if I could have someone,
I'll make the motion, sure. I'll move to approve the proposed amendment of liquor license 00012-RS-0720 held by Abbey Park at 550 Adams Street to reduce the licensed area of the premises from 6,800 square feet to 5,991 square feet.
Second.
any discussion, any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Good
Thank
luck.
you very much.
Thank you. Item 6, we have a conference with Joseph Chamberlain regarding a municipal broadband committee update. Thank you for coming in, Joe. Good evening. You've been busy. I've been reading your homework.
I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for having me here tonight. I'm here joined by Jim Scroy, who's also the town's Director of Information Technology, and also a member of the board of, I'm sorry, a member of the Broadband Committee. Oh, there we go. So up on the screen, I have a PowerPoint presentation. It's an abridged version of the report that I shared with the town administrator, and I believe has been forwarded to the Board of Selectmen. I think this should only take about maybe 10 minutes to get through, and hopefully we can leave some time for questions afterwards if anyone on the Board of Selectmen might have any. Okay, so the Municipal Broadband Committee, made up of 7 citizens of Milton, listed up on the board. Mark Botello, myself, Joe Chamberlain, Mark Day, Jay Fundling, Steve Paxia, Jim Scroy, who's with me tonight, and John Sullivan. Our charge, granted by the Board of Selectmen last October, was to examine the feasibility of the town of Milton to develop and possibly operate its own broadband network. And I'm just going to jump into the executive summary right here, and then get into a little bit more detail right after this slide. So our recommendation is that the town's near-term efforts be focused on replacing the institutional network, otherwise known as the iNet, with a network owned and controlled by the town of Milton. The iNet is a key element of the Comcast negotiation, and the committee believes that there's a significant opportunity today to substantially improve the iNet, both in the short and the long term. We also would recommend that at this time, with regard to a town-wide residential broadband network, that we strongly recommend that any decisions on the town-wide residential network be deferred until after the immediate needs of the town's iNet are met. And I'll get into the details in the following slides, but this is all in the context of the Comcast renegotiation ongoing right now, where Comcast, as the owner and not operator, but they support the town's INET, has indicated that they do not want to support the INET anymore. So when the broadband committee first started meeting back at the beginning of March, this wasn't clear to us. We had heard a little bit about this, about the Comcast negotiation, but as our research and the people that we talked to, as we learned more and more, it became quite clear fairly quickly for us that the INET and how the town deals with it has to take precedence over any sort of townwide residential network. And I hope to explain why in the next couple minutes, so I'll thank you. So our methodology, pretty straightforward. We've had 10 public meetings between March and June of this year. The committee invited a total of 11 guest speakers over the course of those meetings to address our meetings. The types of people who we invited, which we included in an addendum to the actual report. I don't have it up here on the PowerPoint, but we looked for, first and foremost, we looked for other municipal leaders, really, in Massachusetts, who are running their own municipal broadband networks. For example, we had as a guest leaders from Concord, who has their own broadband network, Braintree, Norwood, and Leverett, Mass, who built their own INET a few years ago as well. In addition to the 11 that we invited to address the committee, I also interviewed about another 23 people who also informed a lot of what we learned. So it wasn't just community broadband leaders who we interviewed. We also interviewed industry experts. We interviewed engineering and consulting firms that do engineering and legal advice to towns who build their own municipal broadband networks. So our summary of findings, we have, in Milton, we have two types of broadband network, institutional, that's the INET, which I've already mentioned, and residential. As I just mentioned, Comcast owns Milton's INET and has indicated that they don't want to support it in the next franchise agreement. And ultimately, this disconnection of support of the INET services could cause major disruptions to the town's operations, of which there are many that are on this INET right now, and I won't go into detail of how we use the INET, but suffice it to say that it's an integral part of the town's communications infrastructure today. Thank you. So, our recommendation. A lot of words up there. Essentially, what we're recommending is that the Board of Selectmen issue an RFP for a professional study of replacing the town's institutional network. Such a study, and colloquially referred to as a mile-high study, would establish the feasibility and likely cost for building a municipal broadband network, an institutional municipal broadband network for use by the town. And in light of the urgency presented by the Comcast likely abandonment of the INET, we also would recommend that this RFP be developed and issued as soon as possible. In interviews with industry experts, we believe that this mile-high study, so-called, would cost no more than $30,000, keeping in mind that the study's cost is a function of how much we asked the engineering firm or the consulting firm to do. And the things that it would do, or could do, if you could go to the next slide, are, well, first of all, my first bullet point there, saying that to target the network design should be targeted at iNet replacement. So that is for the town's use exclusively, as opposed to building a residential network. If you could click ahead one more, Mike. The other issues of study that we envision that we would ask in this RFP is that the new design not replicate what we have today, but that the town ask that this RFP study the possibility of building, frankly, a more robust system, network rather, that we can not only use for the town's immediate needs, but that may serve as a backbone for future network development. And this is where where we see, try not to get too overly poetic here, but where the future lies for the town's communications infrastructure potentially would be on this network. So that we ask that the study keep future uses in mind for such a network. Item 4 is that we've already talked to nearby towns, Braintree and Norwood specifically, that currently operate their own municipal broadband networks, and they are keen to be considered as potential partners or operators for our network. This is actually a viable model already in Massachusetts. The town of Leverett contracts with the city of Holyoke in an intergovernmental contracting agreement where Leverett owns and controls their broadband network, and Holyoke is the network operator. So they take care of the day-to-day and the maintenance of the actual system. Thank you. I actually kind of already got ahead of myself. Number 5 here is the functional and technical capabilities of the envisioned network should support the possibility for other uses on the horizon. For example, first responder communications, educational services for the schools, healthcare services for our local elderly communities, and also leasing to third-party operators, as well as possible expansion to support a residential network. And lastly, the study should consider the potential of public-private partnerships, with the caveat that the town of Milton actually retain ownership and control over any resulting network that we build. So there it is. That's the bottom line, is that we're recommending that that we issue this RFP to do this study. The committee would be happy to assist with putting together the RFP.
That's my first question.
Yep. We have made a lot of connections. We've met a lot of people. We've met a lot of people who are really excited and willing to help Milton. The idea of municipal broadband is if it's not yet a tidal wave nationally, it is definitely gaining some momentum.
Well, you've done a lot of work since your last time here, I can say that. And I believe that was with, you made that introduction,
Yeah.
is that correct?
What? Oh,
I'm
sorry.
I'm also going to recognize Steve Paxi, who was a member of your committee who
Oh,
just
sorry,
arrived
Steve.
as well.
Yeah, Steve is reminding me that there was something that we discovered in our research, that the town of Milton might actually have. Well, I don't want to characterize it as an advantage or disadvantage or anything yet, but we have a municipal fire alarm system right now that uses the poles, uses existing pole attachments, that a few of the industry experts who we've talked to actually got very excited about that possibility. And the possibility that they were excited about was that up on these poles, which are all owned by either Eversource or Verizon, thank you, that the idea of pole attachments is a huge piece to building a network like this. And if we already have an existing fire alarm system up on these poles, that there is a very good possibility that that's something that would work in our advantage, and would be something that we would ask specifically to be addressed in this RFP. Frankly, the thing to be addressed is the town's rights to use this municipal space to build this network. If it turns out, and this is where some of our industry experts got excited, if it turns out that we are able to use this municipal space up on the poles, that would be a huge cost savings to the town in many different fronts, not just pole attachment fees and that sort of thing, but also just labor and construction. Did I miss anything?
But
Steve should,
You want to go right up there?
you should take the microphone.
Sorry. There you go.
if we don't have that access to the poles, then we could have a significant expense of having to contract access to those poles. And so when we talk about it being important to the Comcast negotiation about how they're going to support the transition, that's a big cost element. So one of the key things from this study would really get to the bottom of that and really get an idea of our opportunity or our exposure. It could be either.
Yeah, it's clearly an example of either owning some infrastructure or not owning any infrastructure, and having to either rent or lease off of someone else's infrastructure. Have you conferred with the fire chief, or Jimmy, have you had any conversations with Chief Grant about the feasibility or the possibility of riding along that?
Well, I had a conversation with Jack Calabro.
Jack, that'd be another one, yeah.
And he was gonna.
You better come up closer. You better.
Yeah, he was gonna try to delve into it a little deeper, to see what original agreements might be in place. This goes back many, many years.
Right.
But, like Joe said, it could play a significant role in this if, if you go and put these wires up and then you don't have the permission to do it, and then all of a sudden it's like, what are all these wires doing up there, and what the ramifications would be.
I'm not an expert, but I did do a little research, and our first fire alarm system was put up in 1915 in Milton. So it's
pretty old.
1915, so it's been up there for a while.
Questions? Anyone? Questions?
Yes, first timing. Joe, you pointed out how this may be important for the purposes of the Comcast negotiations. The Comcast contract, current contract, terminates in October of this year. And there are ongoing discussions and back and forth. How long do you think it would take, or do you have any idea how long it would take to conduct a mile-high study?
Yes, I've asked several of these industry experts who I mentioned earlier, and again, depending on how much we ask them to do, a study like this could take anywhere from as little as 4 or 5 or 6 weeks to actually complete. And then obviously if we ask them to do more stuff, it'll take longer. But the ballpark purview of the study that we discussed, the consensus among the 3 or 4 people who I asked was about 4 or 5 weeks.
And the cost that you're estimating is, you envision
cost.
the cost you're envisioning is $30,000?
Yeah. I would also add that this study, if it's done, if the town, let's hypothetically say it's $30,000. This study forms the basis of the larger, more in-depth plans. So it's really, it would really be like almost a first phase of a larger plan if this network were actually to be built.
Can
Melinda.
you tell us what will happen in October if we get to the point where, I mean, it sounds like Comcast is not going to support iNet, so what happens?
I don't know. I mean, other than, I'm not that close to the Comcast negotiation, so I'm not sure if I'm the person to actually ask.
I think Attorney Solomon, probably,
Okay.
Mike will be the two. on
Yeah.
that.
So briefly, if I might,
Or Jim might
Yeah.
have,
go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say, contract ending October, they're not going to pull the plug on the INET. There will be a period of months, possibly 2 years, that we have to implement a new INET on our own. And like Joe said, to get the right INET put in place, that's the key right now, to make sure that it is a little different design than what we presently have. The INET that's out there was put in place roughly, I want to say 17, 18 years ago, that we've been using it in the town. Comcast put the wires there 20 years ago, I believe. So the 17-year period, we've been using it to connect all of our buildings, the data network, the telephone network. Just recently, we added the fire and police radio communication onto the network. So there's a substantial amount of communication that this INET utilizes. So, like I say, we need to make sure that what we put in its place is the right solution.
If I could add, though, the folks from Braintree and Norwood, and a technician who's worked on this, the danger is diminished levels of support. If they don't, if they're out of this business and they say, oh, they'll support it under duress, and then there's a hurricane or something like that, we won't be necessarily at the top of the chain. So, so I don't think this is something we want to, yes, I agree with Jim. I think it's unlikely that, and I think Mike would know too, it's unlikely that they pull the plug. But will it remain functional in its current state? As Jim points out, it's a pretty old system. So it's not like it's brand new and doesn't have any ongoing maintenance issues. It's an old system. So we need to be cognizant of that and be planning for that.
Further, go ahead.
Thanks.
You have another one?
I know.
So just for everyone who's at home, just to kind of, and I think I can do this maybe a little bit in layman's terms. If you notice how you replace your cell phone every few years, and for those who don't do that and go a long time, suddenly that technology is no longer supported because it's aged out. And the technology for service and warranty shifts to the newer equipment. So two things you're definitely doing, which are, and people don't understand, and what, just to build on what Jim said, everything absent, I believe, 911, that comes into this town, be it computer, over the internet, phone system, general business numbers, police and fire non-emergency numbers, everything at town hall, this building, the schools, travels that backbone. It's as simple as that. So it's aged, it's outdated, it has no room for expansion. It's definitely not something that we want to be basing the next 10 or 20 years upon. So I think it's very prudent of us to be doing this now. On the radio communication side of public safety, which is supported primarily by Verizon, which is what they call T1, it's a copper system, you're facing the same thing. Verizon no longer wants to support T1 copper lines. They want to start going point-to-point microwave, travel a microwave dish. So I definitely am, having done a lot of this, I'm impressed with the way you're going with it, because it's definitely taking us into the 21st century from a backbone perspective, as well as an operational perspective. And in answer to Melinda's, you can't, especially in the public safety arena, you can't just pull the plug the day the contract ends, because, you know, and that also, I just want to live on what you said is, because this is opposite, most things we do here are citizens first. Your comments about the INET being so critical in this negotiation is because the citizens of this town are so dependent on the backbone that gives them service and communication every day, in every way, shape, and form. So I'm very happy with the way you're going in that aspect. Any other comments? All yours.
So I guess the question for us is, do we think that we should issue an RFP, and do we have the money to do it? And you know, maybe that's for discussion at another time, or maybe it's for discussion now. I don't know the answer to either of those questions, but you know, that's what we need to determine.
Given that October's tomorrow, I'm fine for having that. It's only $30,000. I mean, if you're all right with it, I'm fine with having that discussion and moving it now.
So just to back up a little bit, there have been informal negotiations about when they would buy the town out of this INET
Right, I
plan.
knew that.
So we've had some of the, I don't know if they're the same experts that the Municipal Broadband Committee has sat down with, but they've priced out what it would take to build out that network. Again, to Mr. Paxia's point, the maintenance of it, you know, when there's a problem now, we pick up the phone and call a Comcast technician, and he's out here. The town does not have a technician that could handle a pole coming down, a wire coming down, something like that. But part of the negotiations currently involves us pricing out a replacement of the INET, and that's part of the buyout package that's currently going on in the informal negotiations. The $30,000 could become part of that negotiation if.
To fund this $30,000. So could
Just-
we at least start to draft the RFP and have it ready to go for when that point comes? You all right with that?
Sure.
Yeah, the one thing is, the pole access, as far as we can see from the proposal that we have, is not included in those costs, and could be quite substantial. So that's one of the reasons that we're pushing to make sure that that point is clarified, because the amount of money that we understand might be being talked about wouldn't come close to the pole access.
Correct.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion?
Sure,
Could
absolutely.
we support the recommendation and concept tonight and ask the Comcast negotiating team, which includes the town administrator and Mr. Zulus, to talk with the broadband committee and maybe map out a plan for us in terms of financing and the RFP and timing, and work some of those issues out and bring them back at a future meeting? Would that make sense?
Yeah, you want to put that in the form of a motion? We'll vote it tonight. You want to do it?
Okay, then I move that we support the recommendations of the Broadband Monitoring Committee and ask the Pilot Negotiating Committee, and not the Pilot Negotiating Committee, the Comcast Negotiating Committee, to confer with the Broadband Monitoring Committee on issues of timing, expenditure, and a request for proposals, and to report back to this board at a future meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Any further discussion? All good? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to add, to the extent that this is possible, Joe, but maybe if you could reach out to your counterpart, perhaps in Braintree or Norwood, and to the extent they're agreeable to maybe making a presentation to us. That would be helpful to me in my analysis, and I think probably helpful to the board as well.
I will certainly reach out to them. They've actually, a couple of them I've actually offered that already.
Oh, okay.
So I certainly will.
Okay, maybe try again. I know you can't, you can only lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. so.
Right.
They've also offered to help with the RFP.
They've all, yeah, they've been, the help that we have found out there has been very heartwarming. There's a lot of help out there, so I'll certainly reach out to them.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump ahead, if it's all right with you, to item 8. We have Attorney Doherty here waiting. Is that okay?
Yes.
So Attorney Doherty, I'd ask if you'd come and join us at the table. this point, I'm going to yield the floor to Mr. Zulus for a moment.
I'll just give a brief background to the board about how we got here, at least from my perspective. It was less than 3 weeks ago that Mr. Doherty, who's a Milton resident, asked me to inform the town administrator of his effort to include this draft amendment as part of the U.S. Senate's upcoming FAA budget reauthorization bill deliberations. This amendment, as described, would mandate that overflights within 25 miles of U.S. commercial airports return to the dispersion of flight paths and altitude levels that prevailed prior to next-gen RNAV implementation. Because Selectman Conlon has more background than I think anyone and has been working on these issues, I consulted with her on this, and subsequent to that, Mr. Doherty asked if the town, through the Board of Selectmen, would support his efforts. And because of what was described as the time-sensitive nature, Selectman Conlon and I have tried on an expedited basis to vet this to a degree with town council, with the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee, with the MCAC rep, and now with this board. Admittedly, it has been an expedited practice because we understand that this is time-sensitive, given that FAA reauthorization bill could be considered in July. Let me just take a minute to tell you how I know Tom Doherty and why I think he contacted me. I first met Tom Doherty about 25 years ago. We were involved in a legal matter together, he with his firm, me with my firm. After that, we were out of touch for about 20 years or so, until about a year and a half ago, or less than 2 years ago, we reconnected. And I think the first time I saw him for the first time in more than 20 years was at a Massport hearing back in late September of 2016. That's how I came to be reconnected with Mr. Doherty. I can just embellish a little bit on what we heard earlier in citizen speak about Mr. Doherty's background, just so everybody knows who he is. He has been a Milton resident since 1986. He's been a partner at the firm of Skadden Arp since 1984. He is a lawyer specializing in regulated transactions. He is a BC High, Holy Cross, Oxford University, and Harvard Law School graduate. He's a former law clerk to U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. He's a former managing editor of the Harvard Journal on Legislation, and he's a director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice. So that is how I think we got here. And where we are in terms of what I know is in terms of this amendment. I received today, and I think it's been circulated to all the members, a letter that the Boston City Council is sending to Senators Markey and Warren on this amendment. It is a letter that has been signed by all of the Boston City Council members, all 13, unanimously. And it says, "We write to express our support for including the enclosed draft amendment as part of the U.S. Senate's upcoming Federal Aviation Administration Budget Reauthorization Bill deliberations. In short, this draft amendment would mandate that flights over residential areas within 25 miles of U.S. commercial airports return to the dispersion of flight paths and altitude levels that prevailed prior to the FAA's Next Generation Air Transportation System, Next-Gen Air Navigation, RNAV, current system implementation." And it is signed by the Boston City Council, including its members, Andrea J. Campbell, the president, Michelle Wu, Anissa Asabi George, Michael Flaherty, Ayanna Presley, Lydia Edwards, Ed Flynn, Frank Baker, Timothy McCarthy, Matt O'Malley, Kim Janney, Josh Zakum, and Mark Cimino. Given that, I think that this amendment is worthy of our consideration.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming.
My name is Thomas Doherty. I live on Adams Street, Milton. My wife and I have lived there for 32 years with children in and out. And thank you for having me. This proposed amendment to the FAA budget reauthorization bill comes up once every 5 years or so, and it provides the opportunity for Congress with some leverage to beef up and address issues. And just briefly, in 1990, in an omnibus budget bill, without hearing, the ability and authority of states over anything above in the sky that is flying was taken away in a budget authorization bill that changed that dynamic, and therefore we all see that it's really just the FAA, which has plenary power over the sky, that is looking at the airline's situation. And their mandate is safety and efficiency in the sky, and that's great. But this amendment would add back a new FAA mandate to protect the public from overflight noise and pollution impacts. July 31 is the current Senate deadline for that reauthorization, which once it happens, that window will close for 5 years, so it's a window of opportunity. In March, April, May, and June, I presented the draft amendment that you have to the staffs of Congressman Lynch, Senator Warren, Senator Markey. Senator Markey's on the Transportation Committee of the Senate, and Senator Lynch in April, and through his staff, indicated that he supports it, inclusive of this runway test that I'll come to. And Senator Warren and Senator Markey on May 15th, their staff informed us that Senator Markey will propose it, and Senator Warren will co-sponsor it. Meanwhile, back in November, I saw a very articulate letter from BWI, Baltimore Washington Airport International, to then Administrator Huerta of the FAA. And it described, with the same pictures that we've all seen, the swath of planes before the RNAV concentration of a sky rail and after. And one looks like a paintbrush ending up at the runway, and the other looks like a pencil. And so I said, let me read this, and this is exactly the same thing that I've been working on since at that time, September. Turned out that the chair of that roundtable was a partner of mine, and so working with them in parallel, I developed, with their help, the same, and I'll put it in for the record, the same dispersion and altitude amendment that parallels this altitude and dispersion amendment that they have then presented to Senators Van Hollen and Senator Corbin. That's helpful for a number of reasons, inclusive of the fact that Senator Warren's staff said, well, let's get some other senators going. Turns, there are major airports in 30 states that are both blue and red, Republican and Democrat, and that's one of the ways to get it going. So that is a parallel draft. And what is it that we're talking about with regard to the core of this? It's to restore the dispersion of the planes in the manner in which we all experienced before the concentration happened. And the concentration happened through a procedure that was lawful, that is to say, 60-day notice. It's all that's required, back in our case, December 15th, 2011. So 60 days later, before the RNAV impact had taken effect, the challenge notice had passed by. And it wasn't unique to us. It happened to everybody. That's part of the plenary authority the FAA has. So once you do that, and since they don't have a mandate to look after the overflight impact, there's no way to challenge it unless there was some mistake in the notice, which there was in the Phoenix situation with regard to one of their runways, but not with respect to others like this. So what this does is to say, let's return the dispersion to the status quo at the time and the year before the adoption of the RNAV next-gen system. And in this case, it would be 2010 with respect. But it goes airport by airport, runway by runway. And so, in the case of Phoenix, for example, it could be as later as 2013 for the runway they're talking about. But in any event, there's a default that says, but if 2010 was more dispersed and you look back at that record, then you go to 2010. Originally, when looking out, it turned out that in Amsterdam, they don't call it a dispersion equivalent year as I call it, but they had a system that said, wait a minute, why don't we go back to where the noise was dispersed? So they call it a noise equivalent year, but since it's also pollution, this is called, I just thought, dispersion equivalent year. That's the mandate, to do that, and associated with that, the planes, as we all see as they come, they're supposed to have a 3-degree glide slope. And they quite frequently do, because it's recommended or it's a practice, but it's not mandated. And consequently, you may see sometimes, as pilots would say, a dirty arrival where the plane gets too low and then has to accelerate back up, makes more noise and more exhaust than it otherwise would. This would simply say associated with that is a 3-degree glide slope. So that's the core of this. Now, in the BWI situation, they have another piece, and their other piece, which I won't go into at all, is another noise study, but unfortunately using the same DNL metric, which, if you remember, that's very FAA favorable, and it's not something that I personally had any interest in. There have been many such studies. But what I did put in here, and then vetted with the senators and congressmen staffs, is a second piece, a second element, which is a low-wind runways alternation test, so that in May, June, July, August, September of last year, the ambient wind speed at Logan was around 10 knots. But that means a considerable portion of the time it's below that. And as we all know, when the planes are coming in and the wind drops, there's no shift. There's no protocol at the air traffic control to ask for a shift. And you can therefore have many hours with appropriate northeast wind, which is about 18% of the time. But then you can have other hours additionally, without any switch, when there's low wind. With crosswind and tailwind, it's not Orville and Wilbur Wright anymore. They still come in. And also we get a very significant share of southeast wind, because the applicable runway 15, otherwise that would have taken that, has restrictions on it. So in any event, the low wind runway test is part of this. And what I did then, yes, approached the city council of Boston, also Fair Skies Nation, and, you know, the phrase citizen speak. I'm a citizen. How about citizen listen? So one of the things the feedback has been is, I have seen I've seen universal support for the restoration of dispersion and the associated altitude. And that's universal. But I've also seen significant support, as I've mentioned, for this runway test. At the same time, at the Fair Skies and in Andy Schmidt's comments, there's a considerable number of questions around, maybe we should do a runway test differently than the way this test is laid out. So I heard that last night. I saw that in Andy's comments. And I reached out to him and worked through with him his comments. With one exception, his comments, which you can read in real time, but then you can also then associate them with which part of this is that all about. It's all about the runway alternation test. So I said, would you be supportive of this? And he can speak for himself, but I think he has in the memorandum or email that he has sent. If that were deferred, and that the core of this, which is the dispersion and the associated altitude, which is supported, and in additionally, the other is supported by city council and the senators, and the congressmen. But would you be supportive if that piece, it's called Section 4, were deferred? And others and people can work on that in the expectation that perhaps that before the end of July can also be presented. Yes. And you'll see that. And so I then sent him the draft, taking Section 4 out, and he had one other comment, which I can then associate with the public speak comment, which is Dr. Christensen said, you know, it would be very important to say that the dispersion will be safe. And Andy Schmidt had similarly said, you know, the planes flew safely on dispersed paths prior to next-gen implementation using technology that's been improved since then. So I took that down. I said, that's one of the things I will then add, and it's the, that's the one element that related to the core provision. And so what I have, and I'll submit for the record, you already have the whole document, except it includes section 4. The one I'll submit takes that out and adds the sentence that I just said back with regard to the dispersion part. And I'm asking, and I'll finish up in just a minute, but I'm asking for a vote of support, or your support, for that draft without section 4, and with the reference to the fact that the planes flew safely before and now have better technology. And I'm asking it because the time is short. Next week is 4th of July week, and what we want to do is to give this, and I've been trying, and then it was only on July 20 that I got the draft from the BWI folks that took some other discussion points out of the dispersion and altitude and exactly parallels ours, which I had said. I don't think those are helpful. They had to make their own mind up. And that would allow then, if we get going, the congressmen and the senators themselves to solicit the Senator Feinstein and others. And even as we get going, sure, this is just get the ball, to have the ball rolling. There will be, this is not the last word, but it's a timely word. If we, if we delay, it would be a pity for the town to miss the opportunity to restore the overflight dispersion and the glide slope maintenance by inaction. So I'll stop that there. I think that the wording is more than good enough and more than supported. I do have the matters for the record. I've addressed the SFO comment, and the comment about well, we want to include that it will be safe because it was safe and we get better technology, and that's my.
And you're comfortable with doing that? You are comfortable with
I
doing
did
that?
it. It's in
Okay.
the, yeah, so I will, here's, for the record, that's the one piece I know orally on then, that I read it out. So you'll see section 4 taken out, and you'll see that put in. That's right here, so I don't know if it's, along with the cover note that says exactly that. And that's, but that's sort of a subset of what you have already, except for that phrase that Andy mentioned.
So we can either, I will either entertain a motion in a second, or we go into a discussion, or if you want to do questions, however, how would you like to?
I'd like to make a motion for discussion purposes, Mr. Chairman. So I'll move that we approve and sign a letter to U.S. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Edward Markey in support of a proposed amendment to the proposed FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 that would add a new Section 4119 as drafted and is presented tonight by Milton resident Tom Doherty.
Have a second.
I'll second.
Further discussion?
I'd like to
Right.
thank Tom Doherty for his efforts in this matter. I'd like to thank the people who came into Citizen Speak and all of the people who are not here tonight, including Andy Schmidt, the chair of our Airplane Noise Advisory Committee and the Citizens Grassroots Group, and everyone who's had some involvement in this. I think it's been a long process, Tom. It's going on for several months. There has been a lot of opportunity to make comment and to make changes, and I think the approach that's been outlined tonight is a good one, that by taking out the section where there may have been a difference of opinion, and giving some additional time to see if that might be worked out and added back in is a good approach. So I support the effort and the draft amendment.
Mrs. Collins?
Is it possible to read the new text?
Right here, yes, here.
Thank you. I just, that would be helpful.
And I'll draw your attention to that, where that sentence appears. You have it? So you'll see section 4 is out, and then
Want to read first, and then-
Yeah, I see that.
if you look on page 3, you just take the third page and look at the top. There's a carryover sentence at the top that, that begins on the bottom of page 2, and it says, "These changes will reduce the impacts of noise and emissions on underlying communities in recognition of the fact that concentrated paths create untenable noise and emissions for citizens on the ground, and that decades of land use planning and home ownership decisions were based on historical and dispersed paths." That was in what you received. It's the next sentence. "Planes flew safely on dispersed paths prior to next-gen implementation using technology which has been improved upon by next-gen itself." That's that. And then, obviously, when you go to the back, there's no section 4. 1, 2, 3. A 1, 2, 3.
What's yours?
Well, I'm not an attorney nor a technical expert, and when I read it, my first thought was that it's complicated, and I suppose I was hoping to see some technical demonstration of how this would work. And Andy Schmidt did send some things that I feel that for myself, I would just need to see how they were addressed technically. So I'd like to hear from the rest of the board. I think that would help me.
So, a couple things. One is, Andy Schmidt has retracted his
Right,
objection.
that portion, yeah.
To the amendment. Two, Andrea Campbell is the Boston City Council for District 4, which includes portions of Dorchester, Mattapan, Roslindale, and Jamaica Plain. She, I think it's fair to say, is very interested in this, and I think this provides a unique opportunity for Milton to work with other communities in concert on this. And certainly, Boston has indicated that they are ready to go on this. And given the time sensitivity, my view is that we should move forward on this.
Mike, I had a question for you. One thing that I'm having a hard time coming to terms with, if this is so time sensitive, and Tom, if it's been drafted and was completed back in April or May, why is it being placed on the agenda now?
Well, all I can tell you is that I was asked by a resident to submit this, to put on the agenda. I sent it to the chair, and it's on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, and in April, we presented it to get started to Congressman Lynch. And then it was the time when to see whether or not that would be something that they might support. At that time, there had been in the FAA budget proposal a privatization provision. That was really the hang-up of whether or not that whole budget would go forward to privatize the FAA. That then said, well, let's wait to see, and then that was taken out in late April, early May. And at that point, the congressman's staff said, the way this is going to come down is that, and I'm paraphrasing, that this will have to go to the Senate, then it will have to come back for conference, so you should therefore knock on the senator's doors, which I did. We did, and that was by mid-May that they then came back and said they would be supportive. In parallel, meanwhile, from mid-May until the 20th of June, to get the BWI and this draft vetted and supported collectively between us. And I can give one example, which I think is indicative. There was in the BWI situation a proposal that the dispersion provision be supplemented by a provision that each community should negotiate with the FAA as to the overflight of that community with respect to each runway. That would have been, in my view at the time, unworkable, unmanageable, and unpassable. But that's an example, but that kind of back and forth to try to distill what you have, took those weeks. Then, meanwhile, reaching out to the Boston City Council to see whether or not they had some interest. So that's the facts of it. That's the facts of it.
If I may comment, can I comment now? Is that all right? So just a little bit to Mr. Factor's question. So even though I've just met you tonight, I know that in the time prior to this, especially the work by Ms. Conlon, Mr. Burns before on the prior board, and all of the citizens from both Fair Skies and ARCA have worked diligently on this. I was aware of what you were doing. I didn't know all the particulars, but I knew something of this nature was coming. From my conversation with Congressman Lynch's staff, I knew it was coming. So I wasn't aware of the timeline until Mr. Zoom was first presented to me. So when it was suggested that we put it on the agenda, knowing the timeline, I felt it was prudent to do it at this point. And I look at it this way, the second thing I want to say, and I want to follow up to what Michael said, is I've felt in the year and a half since I've got here that the one community we really needed to have a strong partnership with, whose impact, if not as great as ours, was worse than ours, is the city of Boston. And I think that letter, signed by all, unanimously by the city council of Boston, says a great deal. And I think in that aspect, I think we're going the right way in this, and that's why we're at where we're at right now. So, and I thank you for your efforts. This is not an easy thing.
Thank you for, considering it. I mean, it's, this Board of Selectmen's been very energetic, and at times I've sort of thought, when we knock on the Massport door, and it's no criticism of Massport, but think about it, they don't have any authority over the sky. They're one step removed, and so it's harder for Massport to make progress there.
You said it in your statement that, and most people don't understand it, the FAA controls the sky. In a state where we live, which is very parochial, we all have, every community has a police department, a fire department, a board of selectmen, everyone has one of everything.
Yes.
With regard to the skies in the United States of America, there's one entity that controls all of it, which is the FAA. And they know it. I think everyone here knows anything about airplanes, knows that and understands that, which is part of the uphill battle, is that it's almost Davy versus Goliath. You just, so any further comments?
I think that the two items that we're addressing tonight through this amendment, the dispersion and the altitude, are things that a lot of people have been talking about and working toward for a long time. And just to follow up on Tony's question, I mean, this is a private citizen of the town coming into us and asking for support for an effort that he's undertaken and is working with the congressional staffs on, and has worked with some of the folks in our community who are involved in airplane-related issues. And so I think it's timely for us to submit this, and not to submit it, but to support it, and to make our views known to our legislators on behalf of the town as the chief executive and chief elected board of the town, to weigh in support of this effort.
I agree. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous.
Nope.
Nay.
Oh, sorry, against?
Nay.
Nay. I'm opposed.
And so am I.
3-2.
I'd like to just offer a little bit of background. Tom and I had a conversation earlier this afternoon. It was a very productive conversation, and I think that everything that Tom drafted up very generously, again, thank you for your effort and your time. We're very fortunate to have you as a resource in all of the people that work on this issue in a volunteer manner. And our conversation, as I said, was a productive one. I don't disagree with anything that you've proposed. I think it's eminently reasonable. What I have a little trouble with is the timing of the whole thing. I feel that it's a bit rushed. It was placed on the agenda Thursday afternoon at about 4 o'clock, which has given us really 3 or 4 days to have a dialogue about it. And I don't feel that I'm in a place right now, being on the job 60 days, I'm still trying to get my sea legs. So this is coming at me a little bit quickly. And I may support it at a next meeting, but right now in its current form, given the fact that it's been redrafted as late as, I don't know, 3:30, 4 o'clock today, I'd like to reread that new draft. before I lend my signature to it. And I understand too, Tom, again, as per our discussion earlier, that the most controversial piece of this draft language was removed. And I think that that goes a long way towards placating some of the opposition that was originally attached to this. The other thing too that I'd like to do before I lend my support to it, if I do, and I'm inclined to do that, I'm just not inclined to do it tonight, but I'd like to double back with Andy Schmidt, who's the chairman of the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. He's been tasked by this board to advise us on these matters. We place our trust in his opinions, his judgment, and his recommendations. And although he has gone on record as saying that he has removed his objection, to me that's not synonymous with support. So I want to be clear that that is in fact the case. Odds are it is, but I don't know that for a fact just yet. I'm 80% of the way there in supporting this, but I don't intend to support it tonight for those reasons.
And I have to echo what Tony said. Mr. Doherty, I appreciate all the work and the expertise that you're giving the town. And I, too, am inclined to support it. I would like to see Section 4 just amended and put back in because I think it's really powerful. I just don't feel that I have quite the time, and I also would like to hear back from Mr. Schmidt as well as perhaps just, as I said, giving it another read and some consideration and understanding it better. I am also new to the job. Thank you.
So just a point of clarification to both of your comments, going back to what Attorney Doherty said from the time he first walked in here, there is a timeliness on this. This window will close in, what, 6 weeks? Not even 6, 8 weeks?
31st, about 5.
31st of May, 5 weeks from now. So I think what we'll do is, I think I'd propose that we hold sending the letter for a week, because otherwise it's gonna go as it's a passed motion. It's, even though you two have not voted, it has been passed by this board tonight, 3-2, to move forward to the senators, both senators' offices. So I think as a courtesy, I'd be glad to give you both a week, if that's all right, to look and have any further conversation you want. And I'll set a timeline of, say, 1 week from tonight to, could we do that? Is that?
Wouldn't we have to schedule a special meeting then?
Yeah, we could do that as well. We could do a special, like one of our 8 AM meetings, just to do another vote, if you'd like to be added to this. Is that all right? Is that in just an air of fairness? We don't have to because it's passed, but I'd be willing to do that, to give you both some time to do a little more homework on this.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that consideration. I do. Thank you for that. It's very generous of you. I would suggest perhaps a full 2 weeks until July 9th. Next week's a holiday, July 3rd.
We can do an 8 AM. We can do a quick, I mean, it's.
Could I add one, I just
Sure.
in response, because Andy Schmidt's name came up from both Melinda and Tony, and I did speak with him this afternoon, and I believe, and obviously I'm reluctant to speak for anybody else, but my understanding from my phone conversation with Andy Schmidt was that he was no longer, because the runway 4 was coming out and would be considered at a later date, he was not opposed and it is supportive of the effort, and does believe that dispersion and altitude changes are what's needed, and is something that he and the ANAC have been working toward, the CAC rep has been working toward, we as a town, prior boards of selectmen have been working toward, so I don't believe that he has any opposition to this article, to this amendment, excuse me. It would be preferable to have a unanimous vote, but we have a majority vote, and once the board votes, that's the
Right.
position of the board. It would be nice for our legislators to be able to have 5 signatures rather than 3 on a letter, but.
And I especially agree with you, given the relationship that we have with the city. I think it's important, so I'll split the difference. I'll give it till Monday, June 2nd, okay? I don't want to go out 2 weeks, because I want to do this before July 4th holiday, and we split. You can both reach out to Mr. Denny. I'm welcome. You can contact me, any questions you have, and if need be. If you wish to change your mind, if it's okay with you, we'll schedule how about one of those 8 AM, an 8 AM, like we've done I don't think we even have to be, I could go just to make it a quorum, and if either one wishes to change, go ahead.
I'm going to be out of the country next
Yes,
week.
you've already
So-
voted. There's
I have,
no-
yep,
yeah, you don't even
okay.
have, so all we need is a quorum, so I'm willing to go to make the quorum. If either
Oh, I
one of
see.
you two choose to change your vote, I'd be willing to give you an extra week. I wouldn't go 2 weeks. I mean, we have made a vote. There is a timeline on this. There is a sense of urgency, and I would not want to lose the window that exists here now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think that, because this is going to the senators, and then they and their staffs need to take it from there and then get into a conference committee. I think we're under a very tight time frame here. And hearing that you're both 80% there, I think it's disappointing to me tonight that we don't have a unanimous vote, but it is what it is.
This to
And
me as
if
well, which
we
is why
can-
I'm willing to, like,
It is a
give it
majority
week
vote.
so if we could schedule for 8 AM, if that's possible, on the 2nd, or 8:30 AM on the 2nd, and then it'll be in the Corona Conference Room. And in the meantime, if either of you decide that you've reached this point, you can just notify Mr. Denny, and we'll go from there. Or if neither of you do the same, we just won't, there'll be no need for the meeting. I think that's the fairest thing we could do. Go ahead.
Oh,
Mr.
no, I
Lewis.
just want to clarify one thing that Tony said, that this just showed up on our agenda Thursday. Everything we have on our agenda just shows up Thursday, any agenda, any meeting. So there's really, there was no difference here.
Yep, I understand.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Given the complicated nature of
Yeah,
this.
no, I
that's all.
understand, I understand.
And it, just in one final thing, you have to have faith in the people who, and I, as I said when I first spoke, I've had to put the least amount of time in this lane as compared to Katie and David as well, and especially you, Katie. And to me, that's really all I need. That was very easy for me to make up my mind, just based on how much I know that you've done this and how hard you've worked. And I knew from the time that I heard the beginning of this and the way you were going, and just how getting understanding, especially from Congressman Lish's office, on how the federal government works in Washington DC, this was a window that was going to open, that if we lose it, 5 years from now, we may be sitting here scratching our head in the same, I mean, to describe what you said, and I believe we've had conversations, this is a simple analogy of like, we want to get the load in the laundry machine and push the button and get it spinning. It may change, it may, in that spin, some things may come out, some things, but we want to get it moving, and I think that we need to capture this timeline.
Well, thank you for the
Is that all
extra
right?
time.
Okay.
And
I-
I do appreciate everyone's work on this.
I
Mr.
just
Zoll,
do
go
have
ahead.
one question for Mr. Doherty, and I don't know if you're able to answer this, but waiting until July 2nd to get a letter of support, does that really result in the death knell of this in terms of our supporting it, or?
I guess it's beyond my ability to, I just think you should do what you feel is right,
Yep.
and we will work hard with that.
Thank you.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman, before we move on to the next agenda item, and this is just technical, but there is a typo in the draft letter that I think we should correct. In the third paragraph, the very first sentence, on the third line, in effect prior to, I think we should insert the word to. Just make sure we make that correction.
We accept that as a friendly amendment to you?
No, it's our.
It's ours, okay, yeah, okay, all right,
Katie
that's
and I,
fine.
Katie and I
Okay.
did that.
You accept that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll accept it, all right. Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank
you. Thank you very
I can't
much.
take comment, it's not open to public comment now, so I'm sorry, I can't. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do here, since we're here on this topic, I'm gonna jump to item 10. All right? Okay with that? So we're gonna move to item 10, which is the discussion of Board of Selectmen's representative to the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee, also commonly referred to as ANAC. And,
Do you want me to just
yeah, I'll yield the
introduce
floor
what
to Ms. Conlon, yes.
The Airplane Noise Advisory Committee is an advisory committee to this board. It's gone through a little bit of reiteration over the years. It began as a committee that had a member of the Board of Selectmen and a member of the Board of Health on the committee as members. And we made a change, I think back around 2015, to change the composition, take the elected officials off, make it more of an advisory committee, which it is currently. It has about 10 members on it. The CAC representative is an ex officio member, the others are all voting members, and they're all citizens who have different backgrounds and different interests, but they're all very interested in this, in airplane noise and pollution, and Andy Schmidt is the chair of the committee. Now that we're a 5-member board rather than a 3-member board, and we've been talking a lot about different committees that we may wish to form in the area of transportation or schools or housing, one that we had not really talked much about was airplane noise. And the prior 3-member board, the way we handled this, we really had one member of the board who was kind of the point person on airplane noise, and it began when we created the ANAC with Dennis Cohane. He was the first, I think he was the co-chair of the ANAC when he was a selectman. David Burns stepped into that role when he became a selectman. And then we reconfigured the committee and took the elected folks off the committee. And since probably late 2015, I've been the prior board's point person liaison, whatever the right term might be, to the people who are working on airplane noise issues.
All of that, all of those.
So now that we have 5 members and we're forming committees, one question that we may think about is, do we want to create our own airplane committee at the board level? And an alternative to that, to avoid duplication and save people some meeting time, might be to put 1 or 2 members of the board back on the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee as members, so that we have more of a presence at that committee. We have people on the board who are involved in it and continuing to be involved in it. But that's really a discussion point for tonight. What is the best format for us? Is it to have a separate board committee, and if we go that route, we need to think about the composition, or to reconfigure the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee again and put elected officials back on the committee, 1 or 2 of them. And we may also want to talk about reducing the size of it. Prior to the new 5-member board, over the last couple of years, I had worked with Mr. Zulus on some airplane noise-related issues, so I did reach out to him. And we talked a little bit about this with the chair of the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. And we talked a little bit about, is the committee too large with 10 members? A lot of people have been serving for a number of years. Is it time to make some changes to that committee? So we've had some thoughts along those lines, and I think one thing we've been thinking about more recently is, rather than creating a separate committee, try to put 1 or 2 selectmen on the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. And that was since we were going to have committees and policies and some discussion about the Finance Committee tonight, this is on the agenda to have an initial discussion about the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee and how we might want to approach this as a board.
There's 10 members on ANAC?
There are, yes.
I hear a question coming, I can feel. The floor is yours.
Well, I actually think, from this member's point of view, it would be really helpful to have elected officials on the committee. As we've heard, there are all kinds of different groups in town working, and some have certain expertise and some have others, or they share expertises and have different opinions. And I think from the board's point of view, it would just be really useful to say, this is the view from where the board sits. We see all these different pieces, and it all comes together in ANAC, and so we have access to all of this. That's just my personal view. I think especially, too, as I think about how the board's composition will change over the years, because none of us will be here forever. That's just I mean, hopefully we'll need it less and less, but I think it will be a little while before that happens. But I think that would be very helpful to have that kind of continuity of experience.
And speaking of that point, the goal is to get to the point where we no longer need an Airplane Noise Advisory Committee, so that this is not a permanent committee.
Right.
I was unsure whether we should have a separate committee with selectmen on it, or put a selectman or more than one selectman on ANAC. Tonight brought home to me clearly that we need selectmen on the ANAC, because we need someone on this board to be able to report what's going on with ANAC, rather than, being held hostage to someone to people who may not be here or be required to be here. So it's clear to me that we need a representative or representatives on ANAC.
Sure, sounds good to me. I like it.
So, go ahead, finish. Go ahead. That
No,
it?
that's pretty much,
I agree all of your reasons, but I also agree because for the newer members, you may not realize there's real money. It's our law firm we're putting dollars at, that's representing us. And we're putting a lot of effort into this, so, I'm fine either way, one or two.
I think it might make sense for two, and I was actually going to propose that if we were to do this, that perhaps Mike and I be appointed to the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. Others may want to be, and we can talk about that. I do think we might want to have another conversation with the chair in terms of the size, and should we, because that would bring us up to 12, so should we be reducing the committee? There may actually be some members who, having served for a number of years, would like to step off. There is an active grassroots group, as everybody knows,
Right.
and the grassroots group, sometimes, we've tried to keep the annex separate from the grassroots group over the years, but sometimes people have gone from one to the other and decided that there may be a better fit for them. So I think there may be an opportunity to look at the size of this committee as well before we make any
Yep.
decision.
Well, Katie, your suggestions are good ones, but the problem I have with two is that if one of us on the board wanted to sit in or attend that meeting, we wouldn't be able to do so because of the open meeting law.
We'd have to post it as a notice of a meeting of the Board of
But that's
Selectmen.
not a big deal, you know, if you want to go, you just
Doing it.
advise them and we post it. It's not a hard
They
thing
meet
to do.
once a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know that, you know, I would like to start to attend more of these meetings, frankly, because I know that it's a great learning opportunity.
I'm fine with how you're proposing it. I don't know how you feel, but
No, I think that's a good proposal, and 10 is very big for a board, so I understand the question about reducing it, and I think it makes sense just from a logistical perspective.
I'll entertain that in the form of a motion if you want to make it, for you and Michael.
Well, since it's us, maybe somebody else should make the motion, although I do think, well, I guess we could still have the discussion about the size with Andy Schmidt
You can do that.
afterwards, okay.
Yeah.
You make a motion?
Um,
They want more work. Go ahead.
I move.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Yes.
I move to appoint Select Women Conlon and Selectman Zulus to the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee.
Do a second. If not, I'll second it. Do a second?
You can second.
I'll second it. Any further discussion?
Aye.
All
Aye.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have to start saying opposed now. That was our first split vote. All, it was unanimous. It was a unanimous, yes. Thank you. Moving right along. Now we're gonna go back to item 7, which is discussion on the first reading of policies. I give it to our policies,
Well-
Mr. Zulus.
Hardly. At
Look, you have
best.
to have humor in these meetings. You
at-
haven't figured that out yet.
At best, Kozar, along with
Kozar.
Tony. So Tony,
right, thank you.
certainly, Tony certainly should jump in. What we have proposed tonight for what we're calling a first reading, although we don't have a policy yet for a first reading, although that's one of the policies that we're suggesting here, is a number of policies that have to do with function and procedure of this committee. And what you have before you, I hope, and I haven't gone through and double-checked what is in the packet, but what I hope you have are the changes that have been fleshed out in the policy committee meetings that we've had in the morning, and also comments from some of you so far. So our proposal tonight is to have any discussion of any items, and we may not get through everything if there's a lot. We may, if there isn't, to have a discussion of any items in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 policies. And one of them, actually, I see on the agenda, and we probably will table certainly until the next item, because we have another item for Finance Committee, I think.
We do.
Yeah,
Yes,
so,
we do.
so that will table. So these 9 policies, then, if anyone has any discussion items or, and comments tonight, or wants to just send additional comments as we work through a second read of these. Just quickly, the first policy, agenda formats and content, basically lays out a process for setting agendas and including content in agendas. The second lays out some explanation for committees of the board, primarily that there would be committees either designated as a policy committee to address a specific need, or as an advisory committee that would be more ongoing, provide more ongoing expertise to the town. The third proposal we have is a listing of duties of the chair, both on behalf of the board and as presiding officer at these meetings. The third is very brief, duties of the vice chair, which is...
That's the best job, by reading all this, that's the best job to have.
which is basically if the chair just doesn't happen to be there to step into the role. The next one is the duties of the secretary, which I think we've discussed briefly before. The next one is executive session, and this really parrots as best we could, and we think we parroted the statute, but we'll double check that with town council. And the Finance Committee, where I think we table. The next one lays out a procedure for regular meetings and special meetings, and there's some suggestions in here for, not taking new topics after 10:30 unless there's a majority of the board voting for that. So a little bit of structure to our meetings, both the regular meetings and any special meetings that may come up. The next one, and I believe, the second to last one is policy adoption, which lays out what we've been trying to follow so far, which is a first and second reading to get input for these policies. And the final one is to set out a basically rules of order and voting that we don't really have here, and to lay out that we're going to follow Robert's rules with some more explanation. So that's what we have, and so if there's any discussion here or changes that people want to send, I think that would do it. Anything, and Tony, did I miss anything? Or?
You did not. Very
Okay.
thorough. Thank you.
So, do you want to set a time frame for comments? Do you
Well, I
want to, or do you want to give comments tonight?
Well, not so much comments. I have just a couple of clarifications I want. As I said, and I'm not a lawyer, and I want to make sure that I understand so that I'm following things correctly.
Is this in the secretary's role, by any chance?
I will come to that. Sorry. But on agenda formats and content, third paragraph, bottom line, provided that policy proposals made by board members shall be exempt from this restriction. That just means that the chair doesn't have sole discretion over...
I'm sorry, I missed, which one are you on, Melinda?
Sorry, agenda formats and consents, I think it's the first one.
Oh,
Is
okay.
it? I tried to go in order.
Yeah. I think the exception there is the idea that it's important for board members to be able to suggest and get on the agenda policy
Okay.
matters. And overall, these policies are will not be necessary most, if not all of the time. They are, in some respects, protective measures.
Yes.
In the event there are disagreements, disputes, or some person trying to exercise too much authority.
Right,
So-
and I would say too, that their real benefit is when the board changes over time because they serve an educative purpose too. So, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. No one else has a question?
I have a question on the one that refers to the 10:30.
Yeah, it's funny, that's a half an hour later then, so you've already get,
Where is
the
it?
planning board's 10.
Oh, it's,
And I just found that out
This
just
is the
recently.
one called Regular and Special Meetings of the Board of Selectmen. So the prior boards have not had this rule,
Right.
but I know that some other boards do. I think the Master Plan Committee picked it up from the Planning Board, because they do have one for 10 o'clock. So I don't know whether this was in this, does the school committee observe this, or something similar to it?
I believe so. I
Do they
believe
use-
so.
Do they use 10:30 as well?
I'm not sure, but I believe so.
So how does it, right now it says the board will consider no new topics after 10:30 unless a majority votes to extend a particular meeting after 10:30. Because a lot of our meetings, a lot of the, at least traditionally, a lot of the Board of Selectmen's meetings have gone to 11 or 12 o'clock at night.
Especially if you're in
So
executive session, right?
if you, let's say for whatever reason, a majority of the board doesn't want to continue anything, and yet you have something that's time sensitive, or you have something that maybe there's a public,
Right.
you'd have to go back, if you wanted to take it up, you'd have to go back out to notice it again. I mean, that's probably very unlikely, but I guess my concern with that, and maybe I just have to think about it a little more, is how could that, what might the unintended consequences be? How might that affect something that really needs to be discussed and voted at that particular meeting, but because maybe someone has left the meeting and we're down to a bare minimum quorum, and for whatever reason, the members of the board who are currently the quorum don't wish to move beyond 10:30, you know, that, I'm just thinking that might present as a problem at some point, but this must be a way around that.
Do you ever remember it being exercised when you were on the school committee?
I don't. No, actually, there may have been a time that we had a pro forma vote. You know, we had a pro forma vote to extend. I tend to remember that because we tried to run the meetings pretty tightly, and if we went over, I think we would do a vote to extend it. So, you know, Katie, I think the idea is, well, if you have a majority of the members that want to continue, then the meeting would continue, the items would continue, otherwise it would go to the next meeting. So it's really putting the control in the majority of the board to continue and or not to beyond 10:30.
I'm just wondering if 10:30 is the right time, too, because, you know, the warrant committee, and I think prior selectmen have always said their meetings always went till midnight, so the expectation might really be that you might be here to midnight a lot of nights. We're going to get through the whole agenda, so long as we don't go past midnight. But, I don't know, I'd be interested in hearing what others think about this 10:30 provision, because I think it might mean a lot of nights taking a vote to go beyond 10:30.
How about a friendly, like, kind of almost like a one-liner with the, maybe something like with the understanding that it'll be serious situation, you know, like, especially like budget, like I could think, you know, what if you had a major personnel issue and you had to, I mean, look at the nights, you know what I mean? What if something was significant and you're right, all of a sudden you're here till midnight? I'm fine either way.
Well, if a different time, I mean, you all have the experience. I mean, if a different time is better to set some, I mean, the idea is obviously to set some kind of fence,
I
right?
get that.
Maybe a different time is better.
Yeah, maybe.
Or, as Richard suggested, maybe some kind of out.
Yeah, like, yeah, some type of, I don't want to use the word agency, you know, like, let me think about it. Because you're right, Kate, I mean, there are nights here that you'd be here till midnight.
Right, so are you saying that you would be looking for exemptions based on?
Yeah, like, yeah, because there's going to
topic
be, I mean,
or-
fortunately, none of you have been in one yet, but they're gonna have, I mean, especially when sometimes you're in contract negotiations and you hear along and just,
I would point out that the language as it sets, or as it is, says it would be the first first new agenda item after
Right,
10:30.
right.
So maybe the idea is that the time needs to be extended. But if you're talking about an item that's already in discussion, if it's a long discussion item, you wouldn't then have to be required to. It'd be
Right,
just,
right,
you wouldn't
right.
be,
I get
you
that.
wouldn't be able to do, introduce a new item after that, so.
How about if we just give this one a little thought, and we'll come back to that, and we'll
Yeah.
put a place mark on that, and
Yep.
come back to that one?
Yep.
Just to keep this moving?
Yep.
Anybody else on this one policy? Oh, you've been there, so yeah, you're in the authoring, so you've, Melinda, anything else?
Just, I guess, on the rules of order and the voting method, so we have a reference to Robert's rules here,
Yeah,
and
I
I
saw
think
that.
at our first meeting as a new board, I know this question came up, Mike, you might even have been the one who asked town council whether we follow Robert's rules, and I could be mistaken, but I thought he said no, and I'm wondering what is there something in particular Robert's rule that, that the committee had in mind, or was thinking about?
I mean, I'll answer for me, and it's really voting in quorum. And it's hard to guess what else might come up. But for me, it's really voting in quorum, and I think those are specifically called out here. But beyond that, if we have an issue that comes up that we don't anticipate, you can go to the book, and you can usually find that answer. So that's the idea, was to kind of set out what we think is really important in terms of not really important, but particularly needed, which is the voting and the quorum, and then anything else that may come up that we can't anticipate now, you go to the book and figure it
Okay.
out.
I think we follow
Makes sense.
we remember pretty closely now, we just,
I think that's right.
right, I can't even think of it where we've had to go that far, go outside the scope of the normal parliamentary rules which we run all, I mean, both in public and in executive session.
And again, these policies are just protective in the event that someone
Right, I get
decides
that.
not to follow
I get
those.
that. I mean, my experience in life with so many different committees is Robert's rules, if you stick to it, it usually is the guideline that will get you through rough waters, you know, when you have to make the, as you say, I can't think of an occasion where we've had to do it, but it does give us the framework to use. Go ahead. Question?
As long as we have somebody who really knows them. I think that's my concern, is if we invoke something that we don't have an expertise in.
Well, we always have town council to refer to as well, going forward. Anything else?
I don't have any other questions.
So I just need a little clarification on duties of the chair, be public spokesman for the board at all times, except as delegated to others. And I understand that, but, and that's good, but I guess I just,
think
people,
so?
people, well, I mean, people, well, I mean, I think it can be really useful, but people do come to us, and I'm just wondering, where are the lines? That's all.
So, I mean, I'll give you my non-chair and chair role. I don't think, especially like public comment, I don't think I ever commented publicly ever in my first year here. And when I arrived, Katie was chair for a short time, then David was chair, then Katie was chair again. I've always viewed it as for public comment, but the chair makes comment, but I don't think anything prohibits a member from saying something, you know, I don't think, but the chair has always been, and Michael and I have had this conversation, because I just did a conversation with the Boston Herald last week, and that was my first public comment with, so I don't find it working hard, and I learned a lot of this from Katie, like, especially like a town meeting, the chair speaks, I mean, anyone can, but I'm comfortable with it the way it's written. I mean,
Oh, no.
eventually everyone's gonna be chair at some point, and it's definitely, I'll say this just in the short term, and Katie, once, when you chair, it's almost like a full-time job. Am I right? Am I, it really, am I, it is really a full-time job. I mean, you're there, every day there's something that you have to address that, and Michael knows, I try to be like a hands-off, like, you need me, call me. If I need you, I'll call you, otherwise I'm not bothering you because you have a job to do. Yeah, and the benefit I have from that is having been a chief, so I get that, but it's, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with it as it's written. I really am. And in the same thing, like, in the absence of the chair, the vice chair, and that's why I said, going even back to the meetings, like, I'm going to be out of state. We have a vice chair. We have to keep this moving. I'm not that worried about.
Oh, no, I think I understand now.
Yeah.
You're talking about official communication,
Yeah.
not if a resident calls and wants to talk to us or.
Talk.
Yeah,
You're gonna
yeah.
you're not gonna get very far if you don't. I mean,
Right.
I think we're all gonna have people come to us. It just happens. They do. They're gonna come. And you're gonna have the, the people you communicate with, the people you know, the people who are comfortable approaching you, and I think that's important.
Right, right. And so it's also important to have one spokesman, I think, for official. So thank you.
Is that okay? I mean, did I
No,
answer that all right?
Yeah, no, that's great. I just wanted to make sure that's what it meant. That's all. So that
That's how I took it to read.
that's how but I didn't want to make any assumptions, so.
Usually, once the board has taken a vote, then the report is usually, we'll talk to the chair after a meeting to ask questions.
Right, right.
I don't think a reporter ever even asked me a question last year, ever.
Yeah,
No,
well, I don't
think so.
expect anybody to approach me, but.
Anything else on that one? We okay on that? Any others?
Thank you.
So, how would you two, do you want to bring this back? Do you want to give some time to further comment on this?
Yeah, I
Schedule
think
this
we
for a
could,
vote?
we could punch up that language, Mike, readdress the 10:30 new business. I'm happy to take another look at that. That's fine by me. Would you feel
Sure.
better about that? Okay.
Is the 9th okay to be able to have this ready, even though I won't be here? I mean, is the 9th okay to have it?
Sure.
You think?
Yeah, 100%. And there was another policy that I had put together. I didn't have it done in time. Mike and I rather did not have it done in time to get on the agenda for this meeting, but it was a social media policy.
Okay.
And so maybe we could
Is that
include
for
that.
what, boards and committees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's ready then, I'm fine with that too. If it's,
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
And it'll be a first reading, just so everybody's clear. So it's a first reading. We all add comments. We all take a look at it, make comments as to what we think is good, what needs improvement, so on and so forth. Mike and I go back to the table. We work in those comments as part of a new draft, and then it's a second reading. And provided that it meets with everybody's approval on the second reading, then it becomes official.
Right.
Okay.
The idea being that, after the first reading, Mike and I rework it, the idea being that we get it right on that second time, and hopefully we will, but we'll find out.
Okay. I'm pretty comfortable. The social media's been one that's been floating around here for over a year, so I'm ready to.
Oh, I know
Yeah.
that you'd like to have that addressed, and I agree with you 100%. It's also the one I feel like you want to get it right
Okay.
out of the gate. You don't want to rush it, but it's definitely urgent, and we understand
So-
the urgency of it.
So we'll leave it, we'll do first reading on that one, say on the 9th, and all the others for
Yes,
vote?
that'd be
Okay, or
great.
adoption?
Yeah.
You all right with that? Adoption?
Yes, the only caveat is,
Oh, you didn't tell me about.
I'll be out of the country next week, and, but we can do it. I think we can still get it,
Okay.
get it done.
You good, Melinda? Okay, so hearing, we'll come back to this on the 9th, and then, given that, I'm gonna move us to item 9, which is a discussion on the Finance Committee charge.
Katie, I believe you gave comments and I see them reflected in here. Is that correct?
I did, although there's one additional one since then, which I was reminded when we were at the Mass Selectmen's Association training program about the financial policies.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of overlaps between the Finance Committee and the Policy Committee, but
Right.
it seemed that it may make sense maybe for both committees to vet them, but for the Finance Committee, maybe to start and take the first stab at revisiting them, and I think probably get some input from the Warrant Committee and some others, because they do cover a variety of topics, and they haven't been updated in at least 10 years. A couple of years ago, we talked about And I think some of the members started drafting some changes, but we never adopted them. So the financial policies that still exist, I think, go back to 2007 or 2008 was the last revision.
Okay.
So I think that should probably be added to the Finance Committee's charge.
Right, okay. And I didn't turn in comments because I had been considering, I didn't know that we had financial policy, and so I was thinking about budget, investment, and monitoring policies, and hoping that the Finance Committee and the Policy Committee could figure out a relationship to work on that. But the other reason that I didn't submit comments was that I thought it might be useful to first have a conversation with the financial staff to see what we can really, what we should really be looking at with them, so that we could structure our goals in a way that really support them in the manners that they need, and that are realistic. But I think most of what we need is here, in addition to the policy piece. I think we're going to be trying to plan that meeting
Yes.
relatively soon.
Hopefully in the next week or two.
Yeah.
I think it makes good sense to have the policy, I mean, the Finance Committee take the laboring or on financial policy. I would include, I don't really see a need for the Policy Committee to get involved in that,
Oh,
frankly.
okay.
I think the Finance, I think that should be the charge of the Finance Committee. You know, I think Policy Committee will have enough to do, and this will be within your bailiwick, and I think, I don't see any need to kind of figure out, you know, where we sit there. I think it should be squarely with the Finance Committee.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Great. Well, and thank you, Policy Committee, because you've been doing a great job. I appreciate it. A lot of work.
All right, Mr. Vice Chair, do you want to keep
So,
things going?
to keep things going, jump into the breach. I think the next item on the agenda, if we want to move forward, I'm not sure if the chair is just going to be out for a second. I'm seeing items 11 and 12 are reserve fund transfers. Why don't we move to item 13, the Milton Police Department donation acceptance, Milton Academy. So why don't we move to that, to defer items 11 and 12 until the chair returns, and move to item 13, which is a proposal to accept a donation to the Milton Police Department from Milton Academy in the amount of $5,000 to support this year's National Night Out on Wednesday, August 8th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. I don't know if Mr. Dennehy, you have anything to add to this, any color you want to add to this?
No, fantastic event last year. The weather held off, very similar to We Are Milton. They have a gaming truck up there, bouncy castles, a lot of fun for family. It's a great family night out. There's some police vehicles that the kids love to take a look at. All sorts of public safety. I'm not sure if they're doing the dunk the patrolman in the water tank like they did last year, but no, it's a great night out for the town. It builds a lot of community. You get to see your public safety officials down there. So the Dennehy's will be there. Well, two of us, three of the other five will be in Ireland, but myself and Jack will be there. It's a great night out. It's a good family night.
Any other discussion? I'll just add that we should give great credit and thanks to Milton Academy for a significant donation to help out with this, and you know, they deserve great credit for that. So, without any further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Why don't we move to item, oh, well, no. We're going to see if the chair is on his way back.
I could do my TA's report as well.
That's what I was going to suggest. So why don't we move to item 14, which is the town administrator's report?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I think it's appropriate. We started tonight's meeting talking about one of the utilities in town, Comcast, right? And our internet. We got news this morning that National Grid did not reach an agreement with the two hardworking unions, and they're at an impasse. And then yesterday, much of the town went into darkness with Eversource. So just the reliance in this day and age of utilities and what they mean to any municipality. But we saw it firsthand yesterday and into today, and it will continue tonight with as they try to wean those neighborhoods off of the generators. But yeah, just the reliance on town government with utilities. It's hard work every day to keep everything running, and you only miss it when it's gone, I think. As a father of 5, we had some children that didn't know what to do with themselves last night when things went down, even though it is summertime. But yeah, I want to thank National Grid reached out to me first thing this morning to talk about their work stoppage and plans that they're going to do. So I will advise the public that if you're having a gas issue and you can't get through to National Grid, that you call Town Hall, and we will expedite that. Obviously, a gas leak or something of that effect is very serious, can become a public safety issue. The Eversource situation started to manipulate itself Saturday morning, and double effect yesterday with a second cause that allowed the Brook Road substation to malfunction. I believe there are about 6,000 customers of the 11,000 in the town who went into darkness for a while. So many of those were brought back online this morning. Some of the neighborhood up off of Randolph Avenue came live later this afternoon. There will be some interruptions in the next day or so. Spoke to John Hoey from Eversource probably about 50 times in the last 24 hours. They were very forthcoming. They met their deadlines with respect to their timelines of getting power restored. But there will be something happening overnight tonight around 1 a.m. It could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours where they take the power off of the generators to the repaired lines. So people will see some type of interruption overnight. But I want to thank each of the utilities for their proactiveness in trying to support the community. We are so reliant on electricity, natural gas, and these utilities that make our lives what they are. So want to thank the residents and business owners. I know East Milton Square this morning was a bit in disarray. All the police officers and public safety officials directing traffic are responding to calls that were of that nature. So again, it's all part of town government, and we saw it firsthand over the last 24 hours. So hopefully life gets back to normal tomorrow and going forward. But so that's about all I have for tonight. It's been a pretty long 24 hours. So
Thank you. I'm going to jump back, item 11 and 12. I'll do
11.
these. 11. So 11 is an approval. These are year-end transfers. There's one for the library and one for the treasurers. We have motions for both, one for each department. If I could have someone read that motion.
I'll move to approve and forward to the warrant committee the following year-end transfer requests from the library in the amount of $554,000 from its salary and wage line, $6,000 to its buildings and grounds line, and $48,000 to its books and materials for the purpose of an upgraded security camera system and subscriptions to the online resources and educational programs. It appears that this is all one motion.
Yeah, it is.
And from the town treasurer in the amount of $3,500 from its miscellaneous line, transferring $250 to its longevity line and $3,250 to its salary and wage line to account for the longevity that was not included in the original budget, and an increase in salary due to new hires.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, item 12, and this is just for the newer members, as we close the fiscal year, just the efficiency of, and because we don't meet, The board usually designates the chair to approve any other reserve fund and year-end transfers, so if I could have someone read that motion.
To authorize Chairman Wells to approve any reserve fund transfer requests and end-of-year transfer requests that may be submitted after this meeting and forward to the warrant committee for approval on behalf of the board.
Seconded.
Any discussion?
And just to make clear that this is only going until June 30th, so it's only a matter of 5 days.
That's correct.
Correct. And right
Does it go
after
the
we
fir- the
post,
first- Does it do the first week, does it still continue, does it extend into the first week of July? I know
I
the
thought it was
bills
the first
sometimes.
15 days.
it's the
Oh,
first
it is the
15
first
days.
15
days,
Yeah.
Oh, it
That's
is.
right, yeah,
And
yeah.
after we
Okay.
posted
I
Thursday's
knew- yeah, I
meeting,
knew
both
there's a,
police and fire came to me with a reserve fund transfer, which was too late to get on this agenda,
Okay.
but it'll be put forth to the chairman.
Okay,
So then this will cover the next 5 days of June and then the first 15 days of July?
Correct.
yes.
Okay, fair enough.
I wasn't sure how many, I knew there was a period, I wasn't sure how many days.
Okay.
We voted? Yes, okay. Did 14. 15, Chairman's report. I'll be brief, I'll be quick. First, I just want to thank everyone again. Milton Music Festival was a huge success this weekend, even with a little rain at the end last night. Michael was there on Saturday night with his whole thing, was huge crowds, a great tribute to the community. It was in the thousands that came over the 2 days, so that was a good thing. The only other thing that I want to bring tonight is several years ago, a resident of the town, Kathleen Ferraro, came to my office with her niece. And her niece was a new trooper in the Maine State Police. And her name is Lauren Reese Edstrom. And in an ironic thing, the story that she wanted to tell me was about how her grandfather, John Condon, was a policeman in the Milton Police Department back in the 40s and 50s, and how he was such, even though he had died, it was such a moving effect for her to enter in law enforcement. Completely unknown to this girl was that I knew John Condon from the time I was a young kid. I met him when I was very young, 4 or 5, and he worked with my father. We became pals. We used to walk down the square together. He actually got me my first bike, and I think when I was around 8 years old, it was one of the first times I remember being affected by death. I came home one day, and my father brought me down cellar all alone, and it was kind of strange to tell me that my friend John Condon, Officer John Condon, had dropped dead in East Milton Square. Well, last week, Detective Lauren Reese Edstrom was named the Maine Trooper of the Year. And it just shows the people that come out of this town. We talked not too long ago about Chief Murphy now from Hingham, who grew up here, was in Boy Scouts, went to school here. And she told me this the other night when she was here, and I said I want to make a point of noting that. That was a great thing. She's an investigator. She's in the investigative unit, the detective unit now, in either the governor's or the AG's office up in Maine. And it's quite a thing. Women in policing is not always as big in other places of the world as it is in our own community. And I've championed women in policing since as long as I can remember. Never thought I'd be the father of one and the husband of one, but I just want to give a biggest shout out to her, and it was a great accomplishment, being Trooper of the Year. That's all I have. Mr. Vice Chair, I'll go to you first.
I don't have anything.
Okay. It's, Melinda? Nothing. It's going twice. Mr. Farrington.
I have one thing that I'd like to mention. I'd like to thank Mike Dennehy by way of Chase Berkeley, by way of Tom McCarthy, for getting a radar speed monitor turned around and installed on the downslope of Canton Ave. A lot of residents came to the board with some concerns over speeding. There was an accident there not too long ago, and it's a traffic calming measure. It's a step in the right direction. The residents are still concerned, justifiably so, and I just appreciate their help in getting that turned around so quickly. I know the residents appreciate it. They've reached out to me, so I wanted to pass that along publicly to Tom. Good work. Job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All good? It's 9:25. Motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
So move. Thank you all. And thank you, everyone at home. Thank you for your help.